I'm working on my father-in-law's 2004 Toyota Highlander. It's a front-wheel drive. The radiator, this is the original radiator, it was broken, so we're going to be replacing that. But removal of the radiator was pretty straightforward. These were transmission lines. I just used a plastic bag and a zip tie to keep them from leaking all over the place. Transmission cooler lines. There was a plastic shroud on the bottom of the car that covered all this. That was like 6 bolts. They were 10 millimeter. And then I just pulled the hose clamp off of that, drained the coolant into a bucket. Up here there was a clip of a wiring harness on each fan. Unplugged, there's 2 bolts in the top that bolt right here. They look like this. They're the brackets for the top of the radiator. Pull those out, and the radiator just lifted right out. Of course, whatever lines are hooked up, you disconnect. So, radiator's out of there. What we're going to be doing next is hopefully removing the AC compressor. So, I jacked the car up on this side, put a jack stand under it. This side I've just got it on a concrete block, which is not the safest way to go, so if you've got jack stands and a jack, that's safe. What I did is not necessarily. Pulled the wheel off so I could get to this plastic cover right here, because I think it'll make it easier to get to the AC compressor. I'm going to pull that off, and then I'm going to pull the serpentine belt off. If I find anything that's odd, I will let you know. Alright, we're going to pull the serpentine belt off, and if you're looking in from the top of the engine, not the easiest thing in the world to find, but it's not impossible. But it actually took me a little bit to find it. Let's see if I can get this camera situated. If you're looking in from the top of the engine, you can see there's like a bolt there. And it is right. If I can get my hand in there, I'll show you, but you can see it at the end of my fingertip right there. It's 19 millimeter. You can't get it with a wrench because it's kind of recessed in there. You need a socket and a ratchet, and you just kind of gently pull it forward towards the front of the car, gently, until just enough you can get the belt off, because I've been told that if you pull them too far, they break something. So just very gently pull it just far enough you can get the belt to come off, and then release it, because it's attached to a shock absorber on the bottom side. It's kind of a goofy setup. You can barely see the shock absorber sticking down back there, if you know what you're looking at. So get the ratchet. There is no room for your hands pretty much here. I'm not gonna say this is easy. Set the camera down for a second. Okay. It's easier when you're not trying to hold a camera. So the socket's on there. And I've got a cheater bar, which is not because it's terribly hard. It's just because it's kind of difficult to hold it in place and do this at the same time. And I'm going to set my arm on this just kind of push it until I have enough room. Second thought, the cheater bar might not work. Starting to come off here. Okay. The Serpentine Belt is off. And when you release it back, your ratchet's going to go further up in here and make it kind of difficult to pull it off. Alright, I'm going to pull the Serpentine Belt completely off. Just kind of be mindful of how it goes. They can only really go on one way because the teeth have to be on the pulleys with the teeth, and the smooth side has to be across the smooth pulleys. So they can really only go one way. And they can really only turn one way, I should say. But still, if you don't pay attention to how they come off, they can be kind of a nightmare to put back. And I may even just leave it partially on and see if I can get away with not taking it completely off. Alright, I'll be back after I start pulling apart the AC compressor. Alright, we're going to pull the alternator. We're not pulling it completely off, so I'm not going to pull all the wiring unless I have to. It is a good idea to pull battery cables off. I'm leaving this bolt sticking out so you can actually see which one it is. That bolt there is a 14mm, I believe. And then there's another one down on the bottom where you can't see. And I'll stick the bolt back in there so we can take a look at it. If I can find the hole where it goes. I think I already moved it so it doesn't line up with the threads anymore, but I'll try and get the camera in there. You can see where one's missing. That is kind of almost straight down below the pulley, and it is a 12mm. So you pull those two bolts, this one and that one, kind of at the bottom of the, there you go, right in the middle of the screen. And then the alternator will be loose. And because what I'm doing, I'm just moving it out of the way. I'll pull the connector that goes into the AC compressor, and then I'll just try and lift this out of the way. I may have to disconnect some cables, but that's simple enough. Just remember to disconnect the battery cables so you don't arc something. Okay, pulled the alternator, set it up on the manifold. There's this connector that's plugged in right here, and this connector that was plugged into the AC compressor, and then those two bolts, and it'll just lift right off and can sit right here on the manifold heat shield here without any problems. Next thing I'm going to do is figure out how to pull the AC compressor. Obviously you're going to lose all your AC refrigerant. This is not a video on the correct way to charge an AC system. I don't know. I've never actually had any training in anything, and I don't know how to charge an AC system. Right now we're going to be removing it. When I pull the lines on this AC compressor here, you're going to lose all the R132 gas out of the system. So just know that if you have a working AC system right now, as soon as you pull those lines, you will not. You'll have to either try and recharge it yourself or have somebody else do it. Okay, so I'm about to let the gas out of the refrigerant system. It is pressurized, so there is a good chance, even if I try and leak it all out slowly, there could be a pop when the line finally comes off. I don't know, never pulled one off before. I did pull a sensor out of one time, and it blew across the yard and scared the hell out of me. So, be very careful. I don't know if it's illegal to release the gas into the air. You might have to legally have it sucked out by a professional. I do not know. So do this at your own risk. Also over here, if you follow the line up to over here, I think if I pull that apart there's a screen inside, but I'm not sure. And over here is the sensor. Now if your AC compressor is not kicking on, it could be this sensor right here, which I guess I should have mentioned at the beginning of the video, but I'm assuming if you decided to come this far, you've diagnosed and decided your compressor's bad. I'm going to pull this connector off the compressor here. There was another connector over here that came down from the alternator, and I'll get back to you. Alright, I got the lines off. I disconnected that electrical wire, but there is a bracket here, and at the top is a Phillips screw that I can't get directly straight down on because of the ear for the alternator mount. So before I pull that, I'm gonna take these off and try to slide the AC compressor forward. I believe the 4 bolts is all that's holding the AC compressor on. This looks like a nut, maybe, so there might be bolts in the back. Looks like 3 bolts and one that may be a nut. So I don't understand what the deal is with that. Maybe it was repaired at some point with a stud after it was stripped. I don't know. But we're going to pull those out and try to slide the compressor forward. And I may not even have to take that off. So if I find out that I don't need to take that off, I will let you know. Okay, turns out we don't need to pull that bracket at all. This is all kind of self-contained wiring bolted to the outside of the compressor. It's out. This is what the spot looks like where it was. And then you just take everything I just showed you and do it in reverse. Put it back together. If I come up with anything that's odd putting it back together, I'll come back and let you know. But I think it'll be pretty straightforward. Also, I'm going to pull that apart and see if there's a screen in there, because if there is, that screen can be taken out and cleaned, I believe.